Chappell Roan recently posed a very powerful question that reveals a lot about our celebrity culture and our culture in general, which is, why is this customary? She was talking about how it's customary on the red carpet for photographers to yell at her, and that she was deemed a villain for having a breaking point because her body literally reacted to that. Whether we're a celebrity or not, our bodies all have a primal mechanism that reacts to perceived dangers and threats. We have a human nervous system that is going to react when we feel threatened. And our body feels threatened for things that our mind can go, oh, I'm safe. I'm just on the red carpet. It's just a photographer. This is part of the job. But our bodies are still going to react to someone yelling at us. Our bodies are going to react to someone grabbing us without our consent. All of these things are natural, primal, visceral responses. If you've ever been in a crowded, bar or at a crowded show and someone bumps into you forcefully, even if it's an accident, logically you go, okay, don't react, but physically you're still going to feel really kind of off guard, or thrown off center. You're going to feel reactive. It's going to feel a little scary or jarring or upsetting. And that's because our bodies react to things. It is really time for a cultural reset when it comes to how we discuss boundaries. There's this attitude in our culture that if you have a certain level of fame or wealth, especially fame, you are obligated and entitled to give yourself away to everyone who wants. If you're in the middle of a conversation, people have the right to interrupt you because you're famous. What recently happened with Denzel Washington, he was grabbed by a photographer. And sometimes people have the attitude that this is the cost of their fame and wealth. That's an incredibly toxic attitude that reveals a larger problem in our society. All too often, and Chappell Roan discusses this, we say that the person who's setting boundaries is the villain. The person who's saying enough is the problem. We see this all the time when people speak up about abuse or, like childhood abuse, for example, people, or, being abused by a celebrity, a more powerful celebrity, for example, like Weinstein. People will say, well, why didn't they come forward sooner? Why didn't they speak up sooner? And the reality is because so much of the time when we speak up in this culture, the person who is saying enough is the one who is shamed. And we have a pattern in our society of scapegoating the truth tellers, of scapegoating the people who are speaking up and saying enough is enough. And these things shouldn't be customary. It shouldn't be customary to be grabbed and yelled at, even if I'm a celebrity. I'm an entertainer. The cost of entertaining and expressing my art and my creativity should not be constant violations. If you are, a person in an abusive situation, you are not the problem when you finally speak up about it. Even though the abuser will often gaslight you and say you're misperceiving reality. But then our culture to a larger degree will also blame the people who are finally saying enough is enough. And there's an opportunity here for a real reset. Chappell Roan, in the interview that she asked this question about why is it customary, discussed Paris Hilton and Britney Spears and how our culture is now apologetic for how we treated them. And really that they couldn't win, they couldn't say no, and they really, I'm thinking about Britney Spears, that she reached a breaking point of trying to people please and trying to put on a face and trying to win approval and be the good girl. And she hit a breaking point because anger is the natural reaction to boundary violations. And as a culture, we shamed her so much for that. And we're looking back and saying that was wrong. But Chappell Roan makes a really great point that we're still doing this. We're still saying that celebrities don't have a right to their boundaries. We're still scapegoating them. And so let me explain what scapegoating is to kind of in the idea of family roles. So in every unhealthy family, they assign family roles. So in a healthy family where you develop secure attachment, you're good enough, you can trust other people, you get to be an individual. You can say no, you can have your opinions change, you can share your truth, you can have feelings. But in dysfunctional families or unhealthy families, dysfunctional just means it's not operating in an ideal way. People are assigned these roles like the hero child, which is the child that can do no wrong, or the lost child, which is the one who was just kind of always ignored. Maybe there was a sense like they don't cause any problems, so like we don't have to pay attention to them. And then there's the scapegoat. The scapegoat is the person in the family who is blamed for all the problems in the family. And the purpose families do this is because if they blame this scapegoat for being all the problems, like, the son with the addiction, then everyone else is enabled to keep doing their own dysfunctional behaviors or their patterns that are hurtful. And it's interesting because the hero child is so excused sometimes that the scapegoat can still be blamed for the hero child making mistakes, or for example, the hero child wouldn't have, been out drinking if it wasn't for you telling the scapegoat child that. So the scapegoat is always blamed, and they serve to kind of alleviate the other family members of taking any responsibility for their own behaviors. For example, in my book, The Codependency Recovery Plan, I talk about how I was in the scapegoat role growing up. And I was scapegoated because I would throw temper tantrums. I would have emotional meltdowns because I could not tolerate anymore the abuse and the secrecy that was going on in my alcoholic home. But my family would mock me for being the problem, throwing temper tantrums. They actually would photograph me, breaking down, and they would even frame those pictures and hung them around the house of me breaking down because I was saying enough is enough. And by scapegoating me for this, by saying, oh, it's Crystal's temper tantrums that are the problem, they were then enabled to keep drinking, being abusive, being neglectful. The adults in my home didn't have to look in the mirror and change it all. They weren't questioning, why is she breaking down? They just thought, oh, she's the problem. And so the scapegoat serves to hold all the blame so that other people are enabled to keep engaging in their unhealthy patterns that are often hurtful or abusive. Chappell Roan calls out these behaviors that are abusive. And it is so true that there are so many things in our culture that have been normalized or being seen as customary that are actually abusive and toxic. And one of these is scapegoating people for setting boundaries. And, in a personal setting, I can't speak to the psychology of being scapegoated as a celebrity, but I can imagine that there's parallels, because in a personal scenario where you're scapegoated in your family growing up, you're going to pick up the idea that you are bad, not worthy, not good enough. And so you might either fall into patterns of being a people pleaser to prove your family wrong. No, I can be good. Look at me. I can be appeasing and happy and not create any problems. Or sometimes people who are scapegoated go, you know what? I'm going to show you just how bad I am. This is the classic example is Bart Simpson in The Simpsons, where he says, oh, you think I'm so bad? I'll show you how bad I am. And so people who kind of take that scapegoat role on oh, I'll prove to you I am that bad, and get kind of a source of pride sometimes from that, they will then engage in patterns that are self-destructive or self-sabotaging. And they might alternate between kind of being self-sabotaging and being a people pleaser. And that can be a very confusing pattern. So if you relate to that in your own life, you might want to explore if you relate to this idea of being the scapegoat in your life. There's an article in the description that kind of outlines it. And so all this being said, it is time for a cultural reset. It is time for us to say, every time someone tells me what their boundaries are, in a respectful way, and then even not in a respectful way, sometimes if I'm pushing them and violating them continuously, because anger is a natural response, but every time someone tells me what their boundaries are, it's a celebration. So when celebrities like Denzel Washington or Chappell Roan say, no, you can't touch me. I don't know you. You can't touch me without my consent. You can't yell at me. You wouldn't want to yell at just any random person. Give me respect. I'm a human being too. This is incredibly important for us to say, thank you for telling me. Yes, we need to be respectful. It doesn't matter your level of fame or wealth. It doesn't matter that human beings have this psychological phenomenon called having a parasocial relationship where we think we know celebrities because we see them, we're exposed to them. So in our psychology, we think we know Chappell Roan or Denzel Washington or anyone else that we're a fan of. Or just see repeatedly, but in reality, we are strangers to them, and we need to give each other just basic respect. I find myself often thinking about how when I was growing up, there was often the discussions, just kind of culturally, I would hear it, like going around society, around the golden rule. Just treat people the way you want to be treated. And if you think you want to be yelled at and touched without your consent and grabbed without your consent, there's some work to do around your personal boundaries, but most of us know we don't want to be yelled at, we don't want to be grabbed, we don't want to be stopped in the middle of a conversation with someone because someone else wants our attention, unless it's like a crisis or urgent. And so we need to be giving each other respect. In my book, Setting Boundaries, 100 Ways to Protect Yourself, Strengthen Your Relationships, and Build the Life You Want, I talk about how healthy boundaries have two parts. In Chappell Roan's showing us the example of the boundaries that we normally talk about, the boundaries we set with others to feel safe, to protect our well-being. She even says that if she doesn't set these boundaries, she will get so stressed or depressed, she either quits music or the industry or has to be hospitalized again. And that is always true. If we don't set the boundaries we need for safety, for respect, we do get so burnt out that we hit a crisis point. It's true of every client I've ever worked with who is in an extreme state of burnout. They're not setting the boundaries they need. That might be at home, that might be at work. And so that's normally the part we talk about. But there's another part to setting boundaries that we don't talk about as much, which is the boundaries I need to set to be safe for you. I'm responsible to be a safe and respectful person to you. Boundaries have two parts. Healthy boundaries have two parts. So if someone tells me, don't do that, that hurts me, I don't like it, I say, thank you for telling me. Thank you. Now I have more information about how to be respectful and safe for you. So when celebrities say, don't touch me without my consent, don't yell at me, we say, wonderful, what a celebration. Thank you for letting me know. What an opportunity as a culture to be more thoughtful about how we treat one another. What an opportunity. And in your personal life, when someone sets a boundary with you, rather than personalizing it or thinking that you're so bad, just say, wonderful, thank you for letting me know. Because every time you respect someone's boundaries, you have an opportunity for a deeper, more intimate relationship. And then you do the work you need to be safe and respectful to them. So if they're like, you raise your voice at me, you yell at me, we don't go, I don't yell, I'm not yelling. We don't argue that. We say, by raising my voice, I hurt you, I offend you, whatever they're saying, I hurt you. I have to do the things I need to do to not yell. Maybe that means I get neurofeedback from my ADHD, so I'm not so impulsive. Or I get therapy, or I meditate, whatever that means, I do the work I need to do to be safe for you. And so it's really time that we stop scapegoating people for their boundaries, whether that's a celebrity like Chappell Roan, or in our personal life. If someone sets a boundary with you, don't personalize it, don't attack them. It's an opportunity and a celebration. And I just leave you with a final thought that if you think that celebrities owe you something because they're famous, because they're wealthy, I want you to really take a moment to think about your personal relationships. Are they as close and intimate as you would like them to be? Or do you feel lonely, disconnected, misunderstood? Because if the latter is true, how you view celebrities' right to boundaries is a microcosm of how respectful you might be for the people in your life and their right to set boundaries. And, if you want to unpack that further, I'd love to hear from you. You can shoot me a comment here. You can reach out to me at on my website, confidently.authentic.com. But I am here for you. Either way, I just want to say, however you feel about this conversation, it makes sense. We have an opportunity here to be a much healthier culture and a closer culture, a more intimate culture that respects each other, where there's so much more connection and meaning. And so I'm sending you so much love until we connect again. Until next time,